right, welcome everyone. It's another episode of our Points in the Paint podcast. Dave Fleming, Sean Farnham, as we cover WCC men's basketball. It's episode 8. The season chugs along. We've got a busy show tonight. We've got Hall of Fame nominee Gonzaga head coach Mark Few ahead of a huge week for the Zags. We're going to talk to Mark on the show. We've got ESPN analyst Sean and my colleague Jay Bilas, who's going to join us as well. Talk Mark Few, Zags, St. Mary's, big picture college hoops, whatever we get to with Jay. We're going to look ahead to this week's games, and there's some big ones, including one in Spokane. Sean and I will be there on Saturday evening. And we'll look back now, Sean, for a few minutes on what just transpired this past week. Another exciting week in the conference.
Can I just tell you, I think the best place to start this week on this is to just get it out of the way early. I think everybody is waiting for the Dave Fleming hell of a good team of the week. and of course, we all know this podcast is sponsored by Hell of a Good Dip, which was great. You and I enjoyed some on Valentine's Day together here in Salt Lake City. But our hell of a good team of the week, Dave Fleming, you said it loud, you said it proud. Who is it?
I did. I told you last night who my team of the week is going to be. Now, this is a very unofficial award. Nobody gets anything for it, but my Dave Fleming unofficial WCC team of the week is, for the first time, the Portland Pilots. They went 2-0, Sean. They won 2 games. They beat Oregon State, a really good team. That's as good a week as Portland has had in a long time.
Yeah, beat LMU, beat Oregon State. I think it's in large part to the fact that we had Austin Rapp on the show last week, and that our conversation with him and getting to know him inspired his play and his teammates' play this week. But for Shante Leggins, really, really big and important week for him. Improved to 5-9 in conference play. Why is that important? Look at the seeding, look at the standings, try to project out what the tournament could be. Maybe they go on a little bit of a run here and give themselves a little bit more landing room to get to Vegas a little bit later. So we'll be keeping an eye on the Portland Pilots, but a big, big week for them. And I agree with you, Dave. I mean, astute pick by you. It always is. I mean, it doesn't surprise me at all. And the unofficial hell of a good team of a week is the Portland Pilots, which I don't think any of us would have predicted going into the week, to be honest.
Oh, no, but you're right to single out Austin Rapp. Now, first of all, we enjoyed chatting with him last week. He's a really interesting young man. He had 2 big games. I mean, he dominated. Oregon State's a tough physical team. You've talked about Wayne Tinkle and sort of the culture that he has going there. He put up big numbers against them. They've got Max McKinnon. Congratulations to the Portland Pilots. That's my team of the week.
I love it.
I'm glad we get to spotlight him a little bit.
Yeah, like a little versatility in like what we do here. I mean, they shot the ball really well, 44% from 3 against LMU. And to me, the LMU was even more impressive than the Oregon State win. Because when you beat Oregon State and you're a team that's been struggling, maybe the thought process is, okay, well, they're going to really feel good about that win, and then they're going to have a letdown. And we often talk about validating the win, right? They came back out, and they validated the win. They shared the basketball. They out-rebounded LMU in that game. They did a lot of things really, really well, including getting to the free throw line. They were the much more aggressive team and put them in a really good situation now to try to build off of this and say, okay, well, now you kind of found something. And Shante Leggins has shortened up his bench a little bit. He's not going as deep as he has. They've won 3 out of the last 4 games. You look at the remaining schedule, obviously at St. Mary's coming up on Wednesday. And then they're at home. Then they're on the road against Pacific, at home against Pepperdine, and against San Diego. And there's a chance to maybe pick up a couple more wins. And if they win, say 3 more games, let's say they lose to St. Mary's, but they win the other 3. You get to 8 wins in conference play. You're a lot better positioned for Las Vegas than you were just last week.
Yeah.
And that's how quickly things can change in conference play. And we'll see if they are able to build off of some of this success.
I totally agree. In a year where we've said on this show and in other various platforms, like this is as deep and as good as the WCC has probably ever been. And if they get 8 conference wins, that is a true accomplishment for a program that could use a little boost. So congrats to the Portland Pilots. I don't think there's much doubt, Sean. The biggest game of this last week was in Spokane on Thursday. I was there. You were in studio, so we talked about the game together on air. Gonzaga leapfrogs over San Francisco into second place, 2 games still behind St. Mary's. It's amazing, isn't it? These 2 teams, the Dons and the Zags, this is the pattern like for 3 or 4 years where they play close games. It's always close at the half. And basically every single time now, Gonzaga opens the second half, goes on a run, opens the game up, and puts San Francisco away. It's a weird pattern. It's got to be frustrating for Chris Gerlofson and his team. They fought hard, but ultimately that is 31 wins in a row for Gonzaga against San Francisco.
You think about what you were just saying, Dave. It was 38-38 the half. San Francisco actually scored 39 points in the second half. Problem is, Zags scored 50. 50. And I think part of that was due to the way that things were handled in the first half for San Francisco. They opened the door for Gonzaga in a half where they should have had maybe, at the very least, a 2-point lead. But in all likelihood, in my opinion, about an 8-point lead. They had 3 shot clock violations, I think, if I remember correctly, where they just didn't even get a shot off. And then late execution, they had a 2-point lead. They shot the ball too early. Because they shot the ball too early, it allowed for the tip-in to happen right at the buzzer to send the game to the half tied. And I felt like at that moment, when I was in the studio in Bristol, that that game was over at that moment. Like, you just know that there's like, the Zags are going to go on a run at some point in time. They always do in that building. We were talking with Mr. McCarthy just the other night here in Salt Lake City. And, inside his building in Spokane, that team always goes on a big run. And then it's whether or not you can limit their run. Like how big of a run is it? Is it a 10-0 run? Is it a 20-2 run? Ask LMU and Stan Johnson just the week before. It was a close game. They're losing the night that you guys were doing the game, San Francisco and St. Mary's up on the hilltop. And they're losing. And then the next thing you know, 20-2 run, game was over. The Zags win. And that's essentially what happened once again. And Malik Thomas had a great game. 26 points on the road. But when it's all said and done, the Zags are the Zags. Here we go again. We're in conference play. It leads up to this week. It makes the scene set even that much bigger. Ryan Nembhard continues to be as elite as any guard in the country. He's back to averaging 10 assists per contest to go along with his 11 points per game. He had 23 assists this past week. 23. 12 and 11.
2 games. Yeah.
Big time. And when you look at that too, I mean, he's been an efficient scorer. You haven't asked him to do a whole lot, but he shot better than 50% in both the games this past weekend. Like, he understands his role and what he's supposed to do, and he fulfills that role on a consistent basis.
Yeah. I think it's a good segue. Well, why don't we take our first break, and when we come back, we're going to call the head coach of Ryan Nembhard, and he's also the head coach of all the other Zags. Mark Few. It was a big week for Mark in a lot of different ways. He loves talking about himself, Sean. So I'm sure I'm sure he's just going to love us heaping praise on him and asking him about being honored by the Hall of Fame and by Team USA. Can't wait to see how much fun he has with that. So we'll talk to Mark Few when we come back on our Points in the Paint podcast right after this. All right, welcome back to our Points in the Paint podcast presented by Hell of a Good Dip. Dave Fleming, Sean Farnham. It is an honor to be joined by the head coach of the Gonzaga Bulldogs, Mark Few, who we've known for many, many years, giving up some time to join us on the podcast. Mark, it's great to have you on. Sean and I, we enjoyed talking to you in person. It was a big week for you and your team. We're going to talk mostly about your team, but I got to start by asking you about Grant Hill came up to the kennel, presented you with your ring for your work with Team USA, gold medal winning team in Paris. Then maybe a day later, you find out that you're a finalist for the Basketball Hall of Fame. That's a pretty good week, huh?
Things you never thought you'd ever even possibly would happen in your lifetime. And just have to kind of pinch yourself. And just kind of blown away by everything. But having Grant there the other night was really, really special, man. He is one of the greatest human beings I think I've met, in this walk of life. And then I don't think what people realize Grant, myself, Steve, Ty, Spo, Sean Ford, who basically, does everything for USA Basketball. I think we were close to like 90 days together over these last 2 summers. and most of it without family. So, I mean, literally, you get up, everybody, you have breakfast together usually, then there's a film and meeting and practice, and then you're working out together, and then you go out to dinner together, and you end up spending a lot of time. Yeah, I'm not, and then all of a sudden it ends, right at with the Olympics, and it's kind of this weird feeling. You kind of miss the guys you were in the foxhole with, so to speak, and so it was great to catch up. He's just such a good guy, so humble, so successful with everything he does, yet so approachable, and he's just a lot of fun.
See, now you know how I feel at the end of every season when I don't get to spend as much time with Dave Fleming. I mean, that's exactly what you just described right there. I mean, we go to Huckleberries, we get the Farnham flatbread at the Davenport, we come and bother you for 15 minutes every time. It's great. It's good times. The Hall of Fame thing, though, Mark. Look, again, I know you don't like talking about yourself, but this is more of a representation to me, at least when I look at this as a finalist for the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. Not only of the outstanding work that you've done as a head coach, but really about the program that you've built and the sustained success and the players that you have brought in over the years. When you think about this stretch, and we're still in that stretch is still going for Gonzaga. But like when you look at this at this moment, seeing that happen, when you reflect back on what you've been able to accomplish already in your career, what makes you most proud about being the head coach of Gonzaga?
Oh, wow. Just the association I have with all those players that have came through here. I mean, it's just been a phenomenal group of guys, man, that represent everything good, not only in the game of basketball, but they're just now to watch them. We had a group that was up from back when I was an assistant back in, way back when my first year here, actually, like in 89, 90. And I mean, they're dads now, they have kids in college and everything, and just laughing and catching up with them the other night before the Pepperdine game. And from there all the way to watching Jalen and Chet and Julian Strother. Anton was back for the game the other night, and seeing how he's doing. And, it's just something I'm not great at is looking back. I'm always like, it's always next. What do we got to do next? What do we got to recruit? We got to do this. We got to do that. We got to, this past 2 summers with USA Basketball. But I'm sure one day I'll go back and I want to go through every single one of those years, because there's just so many, and it's all about the players, man, and just so many special guys over the years.
I don't know if I've ever asked you this, Mark. Who inspired you to become a coach?
I just loved being involved in athletics. I was one of those guys that played football in the fall, basketball in the winter, and baseball, in the spring and summer, and whatever time of year it was, that was my favorite sport. And um, in the little town I grew up in, it was a basketball town, and we had great teams, you looked up to. And then also, I was fortunate enough to play in great teams all the way, like 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade. Those are all my guys, and all the way up. We were ranked number one my senior year, pretty much the whole year. And then lost at state, and then semifinals. We were undefeated. But my high school coach, Doug Orton, was just somebody that I thought the world of. And he was just one of those guys. He made me always think about, why? Why are we doing this? We're doing this because this will help that, or this is attack a zone, an odd front zone, an even front zone. He always got my head kind of turned like that. So I always thought, yeah, that'd be fun, and so I ended up going into, I was graduated from U of O with a degree in education, and was actually coaching. I went back to my old high school and coached for Doug Orton. Started as a freshman coach, and then was helping him with the varsity, and then a couple of years in Eugene, and then I got the chance to come up as a graduate assistant at Gonzaga with Dan Munson. And it's crazy, full circle now, guys. Like, Dan lives about a mile away from me here. He's coaching at Eastern Washington. So he actually he'll stop by on the way home sometime. And it's just crazy how it's all turned out.
You know, one of the guys that you're really close with that we've talked about before is Tom Izzo. A monumental week for him, passing Bob Knight as the winningest coach in the Big Ten. Can you talk about what Tom's meant to you and how big of an influence Tom's been in your coaching career?
I just love his man. He'll always call. He usually likes to call after a you know loss or something tough to kind of pick you up. But we've been on several committees now over the years, just trying to fight the good fight for college basketball. And his passion for that is so, God, I just love it. And so we'll not only be on the committee calls, but then the best things are the calls after. I always tell Marcy, like, all right, here we go. It usually is will call, and then Coach Cal will call, and just kind of lined up with our complaints about the state of the game or what we're fighting, or trying to get through and all that. But his passion. Loved his teams over the years. I love how they play. We borrowed a lot of things. We got our butts kicked by them. Man, back in we was in Atlanta, and on the glass, really, really bad in a Sweet 16 game. And from that point forward, we really started focusing on rebounding in our in our program. And I think it really kind of helped us as we moved on to take that next step. But unbelievable coach and an even better person. And it's so cool. Like I watched a video tribute to him. Some of those people that he surpassed or people that he really looked up to and even competed against. And I mean, nobody's going to touch that record now. I mean, there's no way anybody will ever touch that.
I love it. Last few minutes before we let Mark enjoy the rest of his evening. You mentioned all the great players you've had, Mark. You got another couple great, maybe more than a couple, but you've told Sean and me your thoughts about Ryan Nembhard. Continues to set records, have huge games. You had another big week this past week. I figured on this podcast we'd ask you to tell us a little bit about your thoughts about the player he's become.
I mean, I think he's the best point guard in college basketball, and I think he's been showing that. And his ability, much like his brother, to see plays developing, and then to be able to deliver the ball, on time and in the right spot is impeccable. And some of the windows he delivers that thing in are so small and so fleeting with the moment. It's incredible. And I mean, he has literally showed up, every single game for us this year. And we really, really lean on him heavily. He's highly, highly, highly competitive. He's tough. He's clutch. Yeah, I think he's developed more as a scorer this year than he was last year. He's shooting the ball very well from three. And he's fun. He's fun to be around. It's just a phenomenal family that he comes from. And I was telling the NBA scout the other day, I mean, he'll be better at the next level, much like Andrew was, because the windows are so much bigger, at the pro level. Without the help side defense and there's lanes open and boy, that really allows them to shine.
Here we go, another season in the WCC, and you guys have got 9 straight Sweet 16s. As we come down the stretch run and the calendar turns to past that midpoint in February, Coach, if I said to you, what's the one area that you're focused on right now that you think is most important for this team to make the stretch run it wants to here in the conference play and then make that run in the NCAA tournament again? What would it be?
I mean, I have to say 2 things, which is probably cheating here, but it's continuing to play with an edge and to understand how important our defensive numbers are and hitting our assignments there and playing with a physicality that doesn't allow people to get comfortable on the defensive end. And then the other thing is, I think we spoke about this, or Dave and I did the other day when he was in town, just getting consistency, out of some of our other guys. I mean, we've been really up and down like, pretty much anybody outside of Ryan and Graham Ike. So just kind of knowing, can we count on 10 points and 8 rebounds here? Can we count on, you know, 12, 14 points with, a handful of assists and some rebounds out of this wing spot and stuff. We're just longing for that night in and night out. It's been a little bit difficult to count on.
We really appreciate it, Mark. You're off the hook. You did
Hey,
it.
that was easy, guys. Yeah. It's always good talking to you guys. Appreciate you.
That's Mark Few, Gonzaga's head coach. We've got one of his buddies, Jay Bilas, when we come back on our Points in the Paint podcast right after this. All right, welcome back to our Points of the Paint podcast, presented by a hell of a good dip, Dave Fleming, Sean Farnham. Thanks again to Mark Few for being with us. A guy that knows Mark very well is our next guest. You know him as maybe the voice of college basketball these days. He's our colleague at ESPN. You see him on game day. You see him on all of our big games. You see him on a lot of NBA these days. A guy we really respect, Jay Bilas. Very nice of you to join the podcast, Jay. Thanks for giving us some time.
It is my honor. Thank you guys for having me.
We just talked to Mark Few. I figured we might start there. He's a finalist for the Basketball Hall of Fame. You've known him very well over many years now. What makes Mark Few a special coach? I mean, whether it happens this time or at a later date, I have no doubt Mark's going to be in the Basketball Hall of Fame. What makes him a Hall of Famer?
Well, it's going to happen this time. He's a first ballot guy. It's a great question, Dave. Like he's got so many amazing qualities as both a coach and a person, as you guys know so well. It's funny. He comes across as everyman, which he is in so many ways, but you put him in a competitive situation and he's truly extraordinary. He's a basketball savant. And I think the evolution of the Gonzaga program has been so fascinating to watch. Like in the late 90s, early 2000s, they're kind of the guard oriented, very skilled little engine that could program that was pulling upsets, even though they were insanely competitive. And as they started playing the big shots, they realized, hey, we need to get more athletic. We need to get bigger. We need to rebound and defend the rim and things like that. And all of a sudden, Gonzaga became as big of a shot as any big shot out there. And you know how it goes. Like oftentimes a West Coast Conference school, the Power Fives don't want to play them because they're good. But back in the day, before Gonzaga's success and to some extent St. Mary's, coaches didn't want to play them because if they lost, it made them look bad. But nobody cares about playing Gonzaga now. They don't mind playing them because they know win we get a lot of credit, lose we don't take a hit because they're so good. I just couldn't have imagined that Mark could have built something like this. And it used to really frost me a little bit when people would say, yeah, of course. Well, but they played a smaller conference. Of course they're going to have all these wins. And I go, okay. And I know, Sean, you've done the same thing, Dave. All right, well, explain to me the 9 straight Sweet 16s and the 2 championship games. Like, how'd that happen? And let's start piling up all the Power 5 schools that have done that. Explain that one. And that's when everybody has to shut up. But he's I've always marveled at how he can be so normal, and then you put him in a competitive situation, and he's as good of a competitor as I've ever been around. I'm so happy for him, but I just wish I could say I'm surprised. The only thing I'm surprised at is this didn't happen 5 years ago.
It's been truly remarkable. And you talked about the development of this program, and it started with guard play and it's developed to other areas. But this year, again, guard play is the focus, in particular with Ryan Nembhard. A lot of great guards in college basketball. He's leading the nation in assists at 10 per game right now. When you watch Ryan Nembhard, what stands out most to you?
Gonzaga's had so many really good point guards that have been so surgical in screen and roll situations and the way they run their offense, which is really, in my view, like a European pro team. And Nembhard makes so many great reads. He's not alone there. They have other really good passers. I mean, I think they had 33 assists this weekend against Pepperdine, which broke their own record. But Nemhard, it's not, maybe shouldn't surprise you with the way, one, that he's been coached by Mark and his staff, but also the family. Andrew was pretty good at that too. You remember this, John, when Andrew came, when he was at Florida, the knock on him was, well, he can't really play fast. And I remember when he transferred to Gonzaga, Huey was saying, yeah, I keep hearing this. So he goes, he can play as fast as he wants. And he kind of got unleashed there. And look what he did. I mean, he's playing great in the NBA. And I think Ryan's going to do the same thing. He just, that basketball IQ, and then playing with other guys that are selfless cutters and skilled players. It's got to be fun to play that way. And I remember, and Mark's probably told you this too. I mean, I talked to him about their style of play one time, and he said, because he talk about these coaches like to grind it out, and he's going, I'm not coaching anything I don't want to watch. And I think he really enjoys watching his guys play and compete. And every game they play is a storm the court game. And it's just really a fun, even though they're hard charging competitors, it's a fun program to watch, fun program to cover, and it's got to be fun to play that way.
Yeah, that and it is a fact. They've got such a target, Gonzaga does. The amazing thing, Jay, Sean and I have another edition of St. Mary's Gonzaga this Saturday. The amazing thing is St. Mary's has kind of caught up to them. I mean, I really just didn't know that would be possible. And they're 2 games ahead of them in the standings. Do you have any big picture from where you sit? I mean, you go all over the country. You see all the best teams, all the best players on Randy Bennett's program, St. Mary's, what they've done. And if you have any thoughts on this year's version of the Gales, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, as you guys know better than I do, Randy's done it in a different way than Gonzaga's done it. He doesn't have the resources that Gonzaga's been able to build up over the years with the success they've had. And he plays a completely different style. So it really is a contrast in styles when they play. Can Gonzaga speed the game up? And I do think it's easier to slow a game down than speed one up. But it's really hard to play against St. Mary's. They're so good defensively. They may even be a better offensive rebounding team this year than they've been in past years. They don't shoot it the free throw shooting, I think if they could lift that up a little bit, that would give them a greater margin for error. But they're just, both Gonzaga and St. Mary's just so tough. And I think honestly, and you guys tell me if you think this is right, I think they've made each other better.
Yeah,
Because
for sure.
they've been the 2 standard bearers in the league. And even though they're very different, I think they take it personally against each other. And that's raised the level of, I think, of both the programs. But, I think you could argue that, Gonzaga, with the standard they've set, especially over the last 10 years, but clearly over the last 20, this year you could argue, okay, well, it's not quite as powerful as it's been. They're not quite as powerful. And people around the country who have been following college basketball, Gonzaga's not as good as they've been. I mean, I think that's actually a pretty heady compliment to them, that they're really good. They're top 25 good. And people are going, well, they're not as good this year. I mean, that's like Duke, North Carolina stuff, or Indiana, or blue blood. So they're a blue blood, and their NCAA tournament results show it. And the only thing they're missing to shut everybody up is closing off a national championship game. And the list of great programs that haven't done that is a long one. And they've been knocking it at the door a lot of years. And I know they're going to kick it in, but it's hard to give them enough compliments, honestly.
Jay, the changing landscape of college basketball overall, obviously a lot of super conferences now, at least power conferences that have great depth. A lot of focus this year, obviously, on the SEC, and deservedly so, the Big 12, the Big 10. For a conference like the West Coast Conference to once again be very well positioned to have two teams wearing a home color uniform, what does that statement make for the conference overall and the health of this conference when you add in the depth this year of San Francisco, Santa Clara, Oregon State, and Washington State?
You know, Sean, I think it goes program by program. What it shows really, because there are a number of leagues that have good teams every year. But they're not the same teams. The West Coast Conference has had Gonzaga and St. Mary's for quite a while now, and I do think there have been times where it's negatively affected the rest of the league, but there have been other times where it's elevated it. And I think we're in a period of time now where it's elevated. And, you know, what San Francisco's done a great job. Herb's done a great job at Santa Clara. They're really good. And I think those teams, I wouldn't be shocked if one of them pulled an upset and they wind up stealing a bid out of there and you get three. But because Gonzaga and St. Mary's are so strong, you know, you have to favor them to play in the final of the tournament, especially the way everything's set up.
Jay, your acumen of what's going on in reading college athletics to me is pretty incredible. And go back to the preseason poll. Number 1 was Kansas. Number 2 was UConn. Gonzaga obviously was in the top 10 at number 6. You know, those teams have not had the years I think a lot of people wanted or thought they have. Roster construction, roster management versus talent acquisition. When you look at the landscape today and you see the best teams, and you've seen all of them, including the game that you were just at over the weekend with Auburn and how their depth. How are the best teams right now, in your opinion, managing their rosters to have specific roles and have a roster that complements each other versus just talent acquisition?
You know, Sean, I don't think that's changed very much. I mean, the manner in which you have to do it now has changed a little bit. It used to be that you might have had a transfer here or there back in the day, you know, sort of before the portal came in, and you had more high school players that you could build class over class, but you still had to deal with players' roles at that time, and you were still recruiting talent and character. And you know, you can argue about the order in that. You know, coaches that have great talent always say they recruit character first, and the guys who recruit character first say they don't have enough talent. You know, I always laugh. I actually heard it this weekend, and you guys have heard this just as much. Isn't it amazing that the best player on every roster is the one who's redshirting this year? When you see the guy redshirting in practice, they go, if we had him, he's our best player. If we had him, and then he plays the next year, he's not their best player. But to your point, like I think it's much the same, that you have to make really good decisions on people and talent, certainly how the talent fits together. One of the things I've noticed over the years is, you know, we see the preseason stuff and we're all kind of educated guessing. When you look at it at the end of the year, when we get to the tournament, it's surprising how accurate those things are, and way more accurate than it is in the middle of the year, because there's still a month left, give or take. And you guys know this, like there's nothing in the rule book that says teams aren't going to get a lot better from now until the end of the month. And teams that we may say, hey, you know, they don't do this as well as, I don't know, they're gonna figure some things out. And some of the teams we think have figured out maybe are going to drop down a little bit.
Yeah, good points. Good to keep in mind over the next few weeks. Where are you this Saturday, Jay?
We go to Houston. We got Iowa State, Houston. So there's going to be a lot of talk about help side defense and rebounding and chucking cutters and bubble drill and all that stuff. Yeah, I'm not worried about a 100-95 game.
Get ready for 54-51 this week.
Let me ask one more question to Jay. Jay, I want to get your thoughts on this. Draymond Green came out. You've been doing a lot of NBA. And Draymond Green came out this week at All-Star Weekend and said that he thought that the game was boring because of the way that it's being played. You're covering the NBA on a consistent basis right now. You're seeing the three-point shots, attempts from the Boston Celtics just hover around 60. What's your thoughts on the style of play and the overall health of the game, whether it's a college or the NBA?
That's a great question. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know the right answer. I think it's wildly entertaining. I think the NBA is wildly entertaining. I just don't believe that people really want to see, you know, Jokic and Giannis fight for low post position and beat each other up, for a two. I mean, I think the game is really wide open. The cutting is magnificent, and like I have a ton of respect for the basketball IQ of Draymond Green. He knows the game incredibly well, and what a competitor. But it's not like Golden State has been working for mid range shots when he's been there. They've been taking a ton of threes, and it's worked out pretty well for them. I think the game's great, but if there's another way to win, those guys are pretty smart. If there's a better way to win, they'd find it, and I'm not sure there is.
We love having you on, Jay. Thanks for giving us so much time. Great stuff.
Well, anytime. Thank you guys for having me.
Jay Bilas, you can catch him on Saturday. He's got Houston, Iowa State. We'll finish up our Points in the Paint podcast right after this. All right, back for our final few minutes on our Points in the Paint podcast, brought to you by Hell of a Good Dip. It's been a great show. Mark Few, Jay Bilas, we appreciate those two guys being on with us. All right, Sean, let's spin it ahead and look forward to this week in the WCC. We don't have too much time left tonight. There are some big games, including one. You and I will be there in Spokane for the rematch of Gonzaga and St. Mary's, and I figure we might as well just start with that one. We were in Moraga, St. Mary's. I mean, it was a hard-fought game. It was a close game. Gales beat them. What has to happen for the Zags to turn the tide?
Let me first of all say this on our Hell of a Good podcast, right, is that and I know that Friday night's the real big night in this conference because it's the Farnham Flatbread American Cancer Society fundraiser. It's the 4th annual at the Davenport Hotel, at the Davenport Tower, at the Safari Lounge, 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. local time in Spokane. If you cannot make it there and you want to donate, you go to any of my social medias. The link is up there. You can donate and help me fight cancer. We are on pace to have a record-breaking year. Online donations have been really good. We're hoping to continue that push in this final stretch run leading up to it. But to your question, Dave,
I just want to follow up before we move on. I'm going to be there this year.
Yes.
So I'm coming up early so I can be there for it. So Sean and I will both be there. You can support a good cause, socialize with other WCC fans, Gonzaga fans, be in a beautiful place, and talk to the two of us about how you love listening to the podcast. So
yeah, exactly.
A lot of people there on Friday.
And we'll be passing out Stu Jackson's email address so you can let him know how great the podcast is. To your point, though, this rivalry is the biggest rivalry on the West Coast. They played more than anybody in college basketball, more than Duke, more than Carolina. And these two schools have been really good for each other. And Randy Bennett was smart. He found a niche, he recruited to that niche, and then he's expanded that niche, and that's allowed him to have success. And although they took the loss to San Francisco, they still are comfortably out in front of Gonzaga. A win by Gonzaga would not guarantee them even a share of the conference title. So they would need some help to knock off St. Mary's. But a win for Gonzaga against St. Mary's becomes a seeding opportunity in my eyes in the NCAA tournament. And in order for them to win this game, they're going to have to be physical at the defensive end of the floor. They're going to have to be physical on the glass. They cannot get beat on the glass. St. Mary's is an excellent rebounding team. They have to dominate the points in the paint. And I think the one thing that they can do a lot better is get Mitchell Saxon in foul trouble even earlier than he was in Moraga. And he's had trouble with Graham Ike in the past. And I think you've got to play through Graham Ike early and often. And then you've got to feed off that energy of being at home. If you can hit some three-point shots, that obviously would really help. This has been a team, as Mark Few said earlier in the show, has really been up and down. Well, these are one of those games that it shouldn't take a lot to get up. And it shouldn't take a lot to understand that you have to be focused in on the assignments that are necessary to be successful. And it's going to be fun to get up to Spokane and see it.
It will be quite an atmosphere. And if I'm not mistaken, because the Zags finish, Gonzaga's schedule is hard from here on out. I mean, this week is in Pullman against Washington State. Then the game you and I will have on Saturday evening at home against St. Mary's. And they finished with 2 games on the road at Santa Clara, at San Francisco. 2 tough road games. So this is also senior night for the Zags in the Kennel. Last chance for some of their great players to play in front of those home fans.
Well, and especially guys like Ben Gregg too, like just how much it means to be a Zag, and he truly does embody all of that. And I think I'll tell you this, Dave. Senior night's are emotional night. You get jacked up. I can remember my senior night at UCLA, and I was like, "Ooh, we're playing Washington. Like, we're gonna go. Like, let's go." Like, I came out, and the first 3 shots I took, like, they weren't even close. Nevertheless, I could not, because I was so tight, and I was tight in my neck. I was tight in my shoulders. My family was there. My grandparents were there. It just meant so much. I think getting through that first like media timeout is when you start to exhale a little bit. And you're like, okay, it's another game. I got this. I think so. I think handling that emotion early is going to be really important for guys like Nolan Hickman and Ben Gregg, Ryan Nemhard. Just everything they've done and everything they put into this thing.
That's 4 pretty darn good players just off the top of our heads that are going to be experiencing what you're talking about. And I'm interested in a lot of things about this game. I mean, St. Mary's, it's last year they win the conference title outright. They win the conference tournament. They're trying to do that again this year. I mean, even a few years ago, that almost seemed impossible. And so what they have accomplished is really noteworthy. They struggled, Sean, in front of us against Zags went to a zone. That game had a chance to actually be almost a blowout in Morocco. St. Mary's missed all these free throws. It could have been like a 15-point game at halftime. Zags switched up their defense. I do wonder what St. Mary's will have as an answer. You have to – I'm right? Gonzaga is going to try that again. They have to, right?
They, at some point they will. I think they'll try their man-to-man first and see if it's able to be successful. Mark loves to play the man-to-man. He rarely goes to zone defense. I mean, very rarely plays zone, but had to go to it on necessity with the way that St. Mary's was carving them up, in particular early in that game at home. Now, again, St. Mary's on the road against Gonzaga in Spokane, a little bit different. But to your point of what Randy Bennett's done here, is if they finish this thing out, they've got Portland this week, who, again, we just named the hell of a good team, Dave Fleming, hell of a good team of the week earlier in the podcast. You've got at Gonzaga, you're at LMU, and you've got Oregon State at home. Not necessarily gimmies by any stretch of the imagination, but certainly 3 games you expect to win: Portland, LMU, and Oregon State. If they're able to win this one in Spokane, now you're talking about a team that really, is looking at a 5 line, I think, in the NCAA tournament, regardless of what happens in Las Vegas. And of course, they'd be well positioned in Las Vegas as the number 1 overall seed and the first back-to-back champion not named Gonzaga outright since Pepperdine was able to do it when Doug Christie was on campus. So, I mean, just a remarkable feat by Randy Bennett and where they're positioned here for the final 2 weeks of conference play, especially given the fact that you lose Alex Dukas to the NBA, you lose Joshua Jefferson to Iowa State, you lose Aiden Mahaney to UConn, and this team really, quite frankly, is better. Like, I mean, they're more productive, they're more efficient than they've ever been, and that has a lot to do with the coaches, not just Randy, but also his staff.
That is an amazing thing. Gonzaga plays in Pullman on Wednesday. You got LMU at Santa Clara. Is a big game. USF only has 1 game this week. They're a half game ahead of everybody in terms of the pace of games they've played. So San Francisco has a chance at home. They play Pacific. Could be a good week for them, just sort of sitting around and watching everybody else. But all eyes in this conference will be Saturday, 5 p.m. Pacific time at the Kennel for another edition of our favorite rivalry, St. Mary's. And it's we laughed with Mark Few about how you gear up for a season and whatnot, and then it's over and you don't have it anymore. To me, these games are like that. Like, you get them a few times a year, and then you got to wait a long time till another one comes back around. So I don't take them for granted.
Neither do I, partner, and especially when I get to sit next to you.
All right, that's it for us this week. Sean, I'll talk to you in a few days. Good job as always. Thanks to Mark. Thanks to Jay Bilas. Thanks to Hell of a Good Dip. We'll talk to you again next week.